It is the darkest, ickiest, worst place that I could ever describe. It's
Christ gave his life for me, and I'm able to look back and see in those moments of darkness where God still had his hand on me.
You know when in the perfect moment when all the hairs on your arm raise and the hairs on your neck.
Fine. Now there's a sparkly ribbon.
You are here for a purpose. You are here because the creator of all things wants you to be here.
Even on that day, God said, "You're very good." Even when you were
That's how you felt. Here's the truth. Know that Jesus sees you.
He hears us when we call.
Hello and welcome to the basement. The basement is not the front room of the house. It's not where everything is fancy and nice and put together. It's the basement. You don't need to make yourself presentable in the basement. You don't have to wear a suit and tie or anything. You can just put your feet up on the couch and talk to your family and friends. Be together with your community. So hopefully that's what you're doing with somebody somewhere right now. I'm Brian Scott, and I am here with Pastor Justin Boding.
I'm excited about this, Brian.
You should be.
I'm
This is
excited.
good.
Yeah, I'm excited about the people who are gathering. This conversation, but most of all, I'm excited about the story we're going to discuss.
Prodigal son.
One of the most beloved stories that Jesus tells.
Sure.
I mean, Jesus tells. It's Jesus. Every story he tells is great, but this one, I find that for most people, there's something about this story that resonates.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. What is it for you?
I think it's the characters. So you've got three really well-drawn characters. They pop off the page. They seem like three-dimensional. They seem like they've got a whole backstory.
Yep.
And then they go through an arc. I mean, there's a narrative backbone to this story that you can follow through. It's satisfying. And then also, I'd say it's the gospel in miniature. So you read this story and you basically hear the whole story of the gospel in its own way. So yeah, it's powerful all the way around.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the fact that no matter what stage in life I am in, there's an aspect of the story that I say, oh, that's where I'm at, or that's where, and it changes.
Yeah. Sometimes you're the younger brother, sometimes you're the older.
Sometimes you're the fatted calf.
Sometimes you're the pig.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so there's a lot of different places to plug in, but that's what I like. So we're gonna unpack this story, not just today, but over the course of 6 weeks.
Right.
So we can't give away everything today, but how about we at least start with telling the people the beginning of the story?
I think that's probably a good place to start.
Okay, it's a story about a dysfunctional family, if I can use those words.
Go ahead.
All right.
We're just going to stop you.
It's a dad with two sons. The oldest son, he's the responsible one. Right. He is, the dad is a farmer, so the oldest son, you imagine, has to go to town every once in a while. So dad hands him a $50 bill. He runs into town. 2 hours later, he returns. Part in one hand, $14.95 in change, exact change in the other, probably even brings the receipt.
Of course, right.
That's good.
Yeah.
Youngest son, not so much.
No, he's a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, you give him a $50 to run to town. He comes back 2 days later. He doesn't have a part. He doesn't have any change. He's basically hungover and he's got a tattoo that he can't really explain.
Right.
I mean, that's who the youngest son is. There's the responsible one and there's the irresponsible one. Just quick review. In your family system, you the youngest or the oldest?
I am the youngest of three brothers.
Okay,
so yes, I identify deeply with the story, and I'm offended by it. Yeah, it's totally. I'm not the irresponsible brother of the three.
Okay,
I think in general, younger brothers they got their stuff together, don't they?
Yeah, something like that. So this is the story Jesus tells. The younger
Where are you,
brother.
by the way?
I'm the youngest of three.
All right,
but I'm the only son, so
that's different. Sure.
In addition, I'm 11 and 12 years younger than my siblings,
yeah,
so
it's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, that's a whole. We could get into that. That'll be episode 7 or 8.
Sure, with a licensed therapist.
Yes. So what happens in the story is the younger brother goes to his dad, and he demands his inheritance, which is essentially wishing his father were dead.
Right.
For reasons we are never told, the father says, "Okay." So he hands over.
As a father of two boys and a girl, I don't know if I would say okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be my reaction to
That's the beauty of the stories Jesus tells. He can take
a parable.
it's a parable. But one assumes the father sells some fields,
Sure, the
liquidates
tractor, yeah.
a third of his estate because that's what the younger son would be entitled to. The older son gets 2/3, the youngest son gets a third.
So as the youngest of 3 brothers, I would get.
You'd get a sixth. Oldest brother gets 2/3.
And
Everybody
we would
else
split. Jim and I would split half of 1/3. All
Yes.
right, man, that does not seem right.
Yeah, I would get everything.
Of course.
Yeah, that's just different family. But again, not saying it's right or wrong. That's how it worked in the ancient world.
I'm saying wrong. Yeah.
Yes. So the older brother is entitled to 2/3 when the father dies. The younger son is 1/3 when the father dies.
Right.
But the younger son, he can't wait around. And for reasons why we're not told, the father hands over a third of his estate, and then there's no thank you. There's no, wow, Dad, this is amazing. He doesn't even say goodbye, Brian. He
It just disappears.
he just leaves.
Gets up the next morning, puts a shoulder bag on, and just disappears.
He wanders off to that distant land, the Bible tells us, where he squanders his inheritance in dissolute living.
There it is. Dissolute living.
It's one of those great Bible words. Of course, the older brother describes it in a different way at the end of the story.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it depends on the translation. And parties and prostitutes
Yes.
is one translation.
Devoured your money with prostitutes,
Yep.
Dad. That's one of my translations. I love the older brother's response because it's clear that the younger brother has made mistakes in that distant land. Some serious mistakes. What happens is, of course, he's got all these friends, but when the money runs out, the friends disappear.
Yep.
He has no way to even feed himself, so he does what is probably the worst job in the world for a Hebrew. Is he goes and he works as a pig farmer, and he realizes even the pigs are better off than he is, and that's really the moment he realizes he's lost.
He is so low, he envies the food the pigs are eating.
Yes. So that's really the theme we want to talk about is that theme of being lost. And what does that look like? And so thankfully, we have some young people from our church who've got a little Scooby-Doo themed skit to introduce the theme of what it means to be lost.
Hey, Jonah, can you go grab me batteries? I need them. They're in the youth room.
Sure, but where's that?
I know where that is. Here, let's go.
Let's do this, guys.
Let's head back.
All right, which way?
Where do those stairs go? Racia!
Amanda, we got the batteries.
Thanks. I just forgot to turn it on.
So thank you again to our young people for providing us that introductory skit. What we're going to ask you to do at home here in just a little bit is talk about a time in your life when you felt lost. And being lost can take various forms. It varies from person to person. But Brian, would you be willing to share a time in your life when you felt lost?
Well, you know about this. You were around for this. About 8 years ago, I left the ministry. I had to step away, various reasons. Burnout is probably the easiest way to just put it nice and concisely. But and you know this, when you are a pastor, there's like a faucet that's on. Because people appreciate your work.
Yeah.
And
Most pastors, that's been our
I'm sure there's
experience.
always, the critic, but that's not what I'm talking about. The people, there's always going to be people who appreciate what you do.
Yeah.
They're thankful for the funeral sermon. They're thankful for visiting them in the hospital. In some ways, you truly represent Jesus on this earth.
Yeah.
And people respond to that.
Yeah.
And so you get this feedback loop about people thanking you every couple days and basically seeing you as a representative of Jesus.
Yeah.
When you shut that faucet off after 12 years, that is tough. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to write books and publish books, but I didn't quite know how I was going to go about doing that. So it was just sort of this time in my life of just probably 6 to 9 months of really no idea what I was doing in life.
Yeah.
And that feeling of having no real sense of purpose, no meaning.
Yeah.
I just didn't have that, especially coming after being a pastor, where you were told how significant you are, how significant your job is, and then to just sort of be lost, just be kind of wandering around for, again, 6 to 9 months before I really kind of figured out my next step.
Well, it's a question of identity then. In
Oh,
some
deep.
respects,
Yeah. Who am I? I'm no longer Pastor Brian. I'm
Yeah.
just some guy walking around having coffee.
Yeah.
So,
What's interesting is, and again, I want to stress this, being lost, everybody's story is different.
Oh, yeah.
Jen, a person who's involved here in the congregation, is going to share her story in just a little bit. Hers looks different than yours.
Yeah.
It looks different from mine.
Powerful, but different.
For me, being lost, ironically enough, was at a time in my life, when I was in college, I felt so close to God. There's this period of time where I felt like God was speaking to me. To the point where, it's
at first I'm thinking, oh, that's great. And then,
yeah, it's like to the point of the thoughts of Jesus and the thoughts of Justin were one and the same.
That's not good.
No, it's really not. So the mystery of God, we were beyond all of that. I was the one, and it was just part of it was an issue of maturity. Part of it was something really good. My faith was on fire, and then it just something good can be too much.
Yeah.
Where it got to be the point when I look back now to realize that every time I spoke, I really spoke with the confidence that God was on my side. And so if you disagreed with me, if you had a different opinion, you weren't disagreeing really with me. You were really disagreeing with, the creator of heaven and earth.
Absolutely.
Which I'm sure made me a fun person to be around.
Yeah, I think insufferable is probably the word.
Yeah. But again, that was a period of my time where, in retrospect, I was lost. How
long did it take? Like, when did you? Has it been recently that you look back, or was it pretty soon?
I had a campus pastor who said something to me that at the time, I remember I held on to it, but I didn't reflect on it. Those were words that came back to me. His line was, that's wonderful, as I described all these things that were happening to me. But he said, just, if God's whispering in one ear, the devil is probably going to whisper in the other. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between those two voices.
That's good.
It really is.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to figure that out. But again, we all get lost in different ways. And so now we invite you just to relax and to listen to Jen share her story of a time in her life when she was lost.
My name is Jennifer. I am from Northeast Minneapolis, but I've been in Red Wing for the past 5 years. I have 3 children, and I was married to their father. But we had a falling out, and you can't really place blame on anybody when you get introduced to drugs. However, when I was with him is when drugs were introduced into my life. I didn't start until early in my 20s. And so it started, abusing my prescription medication, my Ritalin. I would snort those. Then that went to cocaine and eventually led off with meth. And then I acted like everything was okay. I hid it from my parents for a long time. And then being married to my ex-husband, we lived in Coon Rapids, and I was a stay-at-home mom, and he was the one that was working. So for me not to have employment was it was okay. And my parents understood that because I was taking care of the kids. And then we moved way up north, and then I came back. And so, they knew something was up, but they never questioned me about it. They never, wanted to admit it until it finally became too much. The cities was my easy access, and, having children, so when you're using, it's kind of known as going to the trap house. So when you would go to somebody's house and you go to use drugs, it's the trap house. I didn't want my house to be a trap house. I didn't want people in Red Wing to associate with me because it's a smaller city, and people find out really quick who you are, and especially when you're not a local, And so I tried to keep it out of Red Wing. So I would use and go get my drugs up in the cities and bring it back. So, and then the last year I finally got heavy enough into my addiction that didn't matter anymore. I was letting kind of whoever, whenever, throughout my house, so. And now I lived at home for months and months and months, until all of a sudden, the day before my son's 7th birthday, so that would have been August 28th of 2019, I get a knock on my door. Now, I was down in the basement, getting high with my fiance, and my oldest daughter answered the door, and it happened to be the Red Wing police. And they asked for me, of course, so my daughter comes downstairs. I luckily passed the drugs off to my fiance, and I went upstairs, and the officer said, "Hey, Miss Mortek, you have an A&D out for you." And I said, "What's that?" "It's an apprehend and detain, I believe, which is a warrant." And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, for Goodhue County Drug Court." So confused, I said, "Okay, well, tomorrow's my son's 7th birthday. Can I please stay? You guys can come get me tomorrow. This is where I live, He said, "Absolutely not. Let's go." So devastated, I said, "Okay, please don't arrest me in front of my house." And so he allowed me to walk down the block towards Family Fair and around the corner so I could sit and they could wait for the officer that could actually arrest me and bring me in and frisk me and all that stuff, because I believe the officer that came was the canine, so I couldn't go in the back of his squad. And so at least he let me walk down so my children didn't see it. But that was the day my world crumbled. But that is the day that it all kind of started for me. So having to go to jail on my son's 7th birthday.
Yeah. During that time when you were using, you said that you had a hard time feeling emotion.
You're numb.
Right, like all you could feel was frustration and
anxiety, and the frustration would, my kids would say, "Mom," and what? Don't bother me. How dare you say my name? I'm busy doing other things. And it was nothing at all. And that's what a crappy thing to do to small children, to anybody, let alone your own children, to say "Mom," It's bad.
And are you, in that moment, are you aware that you're lost, or
No.
you have no real awareness that you're lost?
No.
The frustration and the anxiety, and that's the only...
Because life then is full of excitement, and you do what you want, when you want, how you want, if you want, with no responsibility, with zero accountability, unless you get caught by somebody, of course.
But that whole time that you would say that this is what it felt like to be lost, is there a way to put that into words?
When you can't even muster up, so I was a single mom for the most part. Because their dad was also in addiction too, and I had the kids with me. When you can't even find enough to get out of bed for your children, when you can't find enough to go to the grocery store, but you can find enough to go drive in a blizzard, leave your kids home alone, or with a babysitter with no electricity to go get drugs, that is the ultimate feeling of lost. It is the darkest, ickiest, worst place that I could ever describe. It's, the things, there isn't words to say, it's just a feeling, and it's a gross feeling that I wish I could put into words sometimes so people could understand better.
A word of thank you to Jen for sharing that story, for being vulnerable with us. We really appreciate it. And then just a comment, that's only the first half of her story. The whole theme of this episode is being lost. And so we're just showing the part of the interview where she talked about being lost. Later episode, we will talk about when she's found and talk about where she is now. She's in a great place. She's happy. She's healthy. But so just want to let you know that there's more to the story that you just haven't seen yet.
That's actually the challenge with this whole series, right? We want to unpack the story, the themes that emerge from the story over the course of 6 weeks. The challenge with doing that is you get stuck in what could be a pretty dark place of just, well, this week is lost. We talk about being found, next week.
Right.
But at the same time, we recognize of the millions and millions of people who are watching this, there might be a couple who do not come back.
I don't quite understand it, but sure, it's
maybe
possible.
Computers break, smartphones break down. Maybe that's what it is. If that's the case, then we don't want to leave people. On one hand, we don't want to give away the whole story. On the other hand,
it's a 2,000-year-old story. We don't really need spoilers.
Spoiler alert. Well, and on the other hand, we want to save a little bit. At the same time, we don't want to say, well, people are lost. Good luck to you. So let me just end with this. Not unpacking the whole story, but the story doesn't end with a person being lost. And none of our stories end with us being lost. What the story in both the Bible and in our lives is about Jesus who comes to us, who doesn't wait for us to get our ducks in a row, get everything, our priorities aligned. We have a God who loves us so much, who runs to us, surrounds us with his grace and with his mercy. God specializes in finding the lost. So if you feel lost today, you don't have to sit around and beat yourself up about it. Just actually take a moment to give thanks that in this moment, God in the person of Jesus Christ has found you.
All right. So now it's your turn. I mean, the whole point of this series is for us to stop talking and for you to start talking. So if you don't have the questions, you can look under the YouTube video or under the Facebook video, and the questions should be right there. And just spend some time and hopefully have some holy conversation, getting to know your friends and neighbors better.
See you next week.